show you a video on simple equations and expressions and whatever else I threw in here that might help you guys. So let's start. First of all, you're gonna have a lot of questions in the linear section that says same, equal, right? That's simple because to create an expression, you just have to figure out which number deserves a variable depending on what you see next to it. So we're going to just underline these two numbers that belong to Discovery Channel. These numbers are made up. And then Apple TV just has one number attached to it because they have no one-time membership fee like Discovery Channel has. So first of all, the Discovery Channel expression deserves a variable on the 4 because it says each. Anything that means multiplication, each, every, per, daily, monthly, anything like that, it's going to deserve the variable because that's going to be your slope. So we have 4x plus 36 for Discovery Channel. And we have 7x for Apple TV. That's all we have. So now, one expression goes on one side of the equal sign. The other expression goes on the other. Now, what do you think you're going to have to do to figure out when they're the same? You solve an equation with them equal to each other, which we just set up. So now to solve that, let's do that off to the side. You need to get your variables to the same side. So the first step needs to be minus 4x on both sides, which leaves you with 36 equals 3x. Last step, divide by 3 to get the x by itself to know its true value. And you get x equals 2. X equals 12. Simple, right? Now, the last part C here, just asks 11 movies cost how much, blank dollars less expensive using blank company. So to figure that out, we just have to plug in an 11 where it belongs, which is the x variable on each side separately, and see what the price is compared to. So instead of putting an x there, we put an empty spot, put our 12, our 11 from the question on C, plus 36 because they have a one-time fee. On this side, 7 times 11 will give you the price for Apple TV. So on one side we have 44 plus 36, which gives us $80. Here we have $77. So to find out how much more or less one charges than the other, we subtract, which is a $3 difference. So it's $3 less expensive. Who's less expensive? The second company, which is Apple TV. So it's $3 less expensive with Apple TV. Alright, same concept as the next one. We're not gonna solve the whole thing, but we're definitely gonna set it up, right? To find out when one is a better deal. Wait, let me see this. When Taxi 2 is a better deal, right? That just means that it costs less money. So we're gonna make sure we put Taxi 2's information on the left side, Taxi 1 on the right side. So here we have initial fee and rate per mile. Remember, the word per, that's your slope, that's where your variable goes. So we have both numbers for both companies. So make sure you put the 2 here. 4.50 plus 1.75x. On the right side, we can put Taxi 1. Their per mile charge. $2 is 2x. We don't have to put the 0.00 for now. Now, we solve this equation, right? 4x. First step is minus 1.75x, so you can get your variables to the same side. Keep going, solve it. Once you get an answer, right, depending on what it is, You can put decimals or you can't put decimals, right? Anything distance related could be decimals. So in this case, they would tell you how much they want to round to, or how much you should round to. You round off the decimal, and it goes in here, right? But if they say don't round to the nearest whole number, right? Then you need to round up no matter what, because you got to make sure taxi 2 is a better deal. So just make sure you choose a number, right, or your answer satisfies this expression that we created here, which is that they cost less money at that value. So let's say your answer is 8. Make sure that 8 plugged into both of these sides, it gives you a true statement that it's less than on the taxi 2 side. We're not going to solve this. You can practice this on your own. Let's keep it going here. So here we have two numbers, same concept. Right? This is how you attack linear word problems. So which one deserves a variable? He has 600 chickens already, or he's giving away 5 each day. 5 has to be the number with the variable. So in this case, because he's giving them away, your slope is negative. So you can either choose negative 5x plus the 600 he already has, or you can just write the first number as your constant, 600 minus 5x. Either way is correct, right? It's just less confusing if you write it this way. Now, how many chickens will Charles have in 40 days? Right? What do you think days gets plugged in? Days is time, and time is always your x. So 40 over here, and you just make sure you follow order of operations. So before you subtract anything, you multiply your 5 times your 40, which gives you 200. Then you can subtract, 400. Make sense? Now to find out when he's chickenless, you have to divide your values. So if he has 600 and you divide by 5, only 120 days. Make sure you remember this is days that they're asking. How many days? How many chickens? So make sure you don't get those two confused. Right, chickens is your y value, days is your x. So make sure you answer it accordingly, no matter what order they ask that. Alright, now we're not skipping this because this jumps into some inequality, so you can see that it's the same concept. I like to show it on the same page because you understand that it's the same thing you're looking for. What number deserves a variable, and so on. Now this one's important because it depends on how they ask this question, what you're going to put in your box, right? If they just ask you for the equation, right, then it's a full box like this. If they put the y equals for you and then put the box, or f of x equals and then the box, because they mean the same thing, y and f of x. If they do that, then the 40,000 does not come into play. It's not part of this equation because that's the goal. And they're trying to make sure you know the expression side of things if they have the y there by itself. If there's no y, then you have to put the 40,000 into this inequality. So because there's no y here, let's do it that way. Which one deserves a variable? 400 each month, or already saved 5,000? 400. So it's going to be 400x, or m, depending on what they want you to use, plus what he already had is 5,000. And at least means greater than or equal to, so make sure it's open to your variable. Greater than or equal to. And then 40,000 is on the other side. So again, if they don't ask, there's no y equals with a box, and they just give you a box and you have to put the whole equation there, this is what they're asking for. But if they put the y equals, then you only put the expression on the left. And you only bring the 40,000 into play when you're solving for meet the goal, which is part C. So let's first answer part B here. Part B says how much in 14 months. So you would just plug in your 14 into your expression. Again, the 40,000 is not part of that. 40,000 is the goal, and that's a question for part C. So here you have 400 times 14 plus your 5,000. And that'll give you the answer for this box, right? But more importantly, to meet the goal, that's when you solve this inequality that you wrote up there. Alright, so let's just finish solving this one. We get 5,600. Add your 5,000 and you get 10,600. Now to meet the goal, just subtract 5,000 from both sides. We can do the work right here because it's so simple, 2 steps. And whatever you get, you divide it by 400. So in this case, it's 35,000 divided by your 400. Now, if they don't say round to the nearest whatever, right? They don't tell you what to round off to, then you have to make sure you know which numbers could take decimals, which ones cannot. Time and distance can be decimals. You can say half a month it's a number that's very that you can calculate easily. So if it was water bottles, you need whole water bottles. You can't cut them in half. Time and distance could be decimals. So in this case, round the decimal to whatever decimal they want, and you get the answer. Alright? Let's keep it going here. Alright, this is the same kind of question as the last one, but with an equal sign. So the same concept applies, solve it the same way. Let's get to these right here, because they look complicated and they are not. If you just want to solve for A and it's all variables, maybe one number somewhere, it's simple, because most of the steps you're just writing, you can't do them. If I say A plus B, you can't do it, so you write A plus B. Same concept when you divide. A divided by B. You can't really divide those, right? So it stays as A over B. So this is simple. All these letters are touching, which means multiplication. So you use the inverse of the multiplication, which is division. When you're at this stage of dividing, you're dividing by what you want out of there. So don't divide by A, you're dividing by everything else. MB. Whatever you do to one side, do to the other. Now you have your answer. F over MB. Alright, on these questions here, if you get a question like this, right, you just gotta make sure you know what tickets represents. Over here it says X is tickets. So it tells you X is tickets. If it doesn't tell you, right, you can use common sense to know if he's selling something, that something is your variable. Right? But either way, solving it is simple. Wherever you see an X, put an empty parentheses so you can plug in your numbers and not make a mistake. 50 is what goes in here. And now follow order of operation. First, you do exponent, then you multiply. And then you add at the end, and we get our value, 7,000. Right, same thing with the 60. We don't have to plug that in. Let's go straight to the last part. If they ask you a monetary value, right, now you would have to plug it in, solve. You don't need to do that, right? If these numbers end with zeros, just like the other numbers you got, right, the answer you got on these two, then you just have to keep going up in values. You know the last number is going to be a zero. So try 70, 80, or 90. One of those will work, and then whichever one works, you put as the answer. Alright? Let's do one of these here. Jade the Spade currently has 30,000 followers. She gains 600 each day. Each tells us our variable goes on that number. In this case, they don't want an X, they want D. They tell you f of D, that means they want a D as your variable. If they say f of X, it's an X. And now don't forget to add what she already has, which is 30,000. Now we can answer these questions. See how this time we didn't have to put a goal or anything anywhere? They put f of d equals. It's the same as saying y equals. So make sure you read all the way through. How many followers will she have in 90 days? Days is your x value. In this case, we have a d, so you know exactly where it goes. Multiply 600 times 90. Add what she already has, and you have the answer. Now, same concept here, right? If you want to find out how long until 90,000 followers, you just plug in another number, solve, and you can figure out the answer. You can also just subtract your 90,000 from what she already has, divide, and you can get the answer immediately. Right, but do the work, because sometimes they ask you for the equation. You got to make sure you know how to create the equation yourself. All right, here, this is a simple one, right? Just what numbers represent in a word problem, right? Any number without a variable, right, is not an each, a per. It's a one-time thing, right? Something that's not recurring. Here you have variables, right? This is something that something costs, because every time you sell one, right, it's 50 cents. Every time you sell one, it's 75 cents. So if they ask you what this represents, you know it's guava, right? Guava and cheese pastry. If they ask you how much this is, it's cheese. Guava, cheese. This is just pastries. So now the 85 cents has to be the cost of something. Nothing is free, right? You go in a store to buy something, you take it in a bag. The bag you're taking is not free. They're charging you from you one way or another, even if it's through the cost of the item, but nothing's free. So in this situation, right, this number is whatever you're carrying out these items in. So in this one, it's just the cost of a bag. If they were carrying fruits in a basket, it's the cost of a basket. If they were getting coconuts in a barrel, it's the cost of the barrel. Right? Something that's not, it's a one-time thing. You're taking it, you paid for it, it's yours. Not something that's a slope or deserves a variable situation. Just keep that in mind. Same thing when you get to quadratic functions. That last number is your y-intercept, right? That is the height of the person. If you think about the situation, the answer is easy. All right, on this question here, I took out the numbers because really the numbers don't matter. I just want to make sure you understand where you're plugging situations in. All right, if you want the actual value of a dot plot like this, a scatter plot, then you're looking at the actual dot. That's the actual value. But through this, right, you can draw a line of best fit, or they draw the line of best fit for you. That line is used for predictions, usually predictions that are outside of your graph. So in this case, you're saying, you know, how much do you think, based on this, how much do you think 150 minutes is? Just saying based on this, you know it's a prediction, right? Not how much was the actual value on this amount of minutes. They're telling you based on this, what do you think? That's a prediction. So you're just plugging it into the equation they give you right here. If you don't know how to make the equation for a scatter plot like this, there's a video on it I gave you guys. Just go to my previous videos. And now plug in your 150 here. You get an answer. $350, $350 and something cents. Just make sure you round to the nearest cent if you have to. Don't think you're wrong. Alright. Just keep two decimals. Alright, let's move it along. Alright, so here we get to kind of linear function situations here. One number has a variable, one number does not. Over here, only the number that has no variable is there. That doesn't mean that there's no slope, no number. That means that it's a 0x. Right? Your slope is 0 if the x is not there. Because it's the same as saying y equals 1.9 and y equals 1.9 plus 2x. These are both linear equations. Right? So we can answer accordingly here. Pretty simple, as long as we know the definition of these words and what these numbers are that represent those spots. So the number that has no variable is always your y-intercept, and that's always your beginning, your starting point. So y-intercept is the same as saying initial value. So already we know we can probably circle two of these answers, maybe even three. Probably not three. All right, let's read them here. Both functions have the same y-intercept. If we look on both sides, the y-intercept, the number with no variable, is the same. It's 1.9. So that's true. So we have to select the one that says that they're the same right here. And same initial value is definitely true if we check that box. So now same concept with slope. Slope, right, is the rate of change. So just make sure you know the rate of increase, rate of decrease, rate of change. That means the same thing. So slope is your rate of change, and that has the variable on it, right? Because it gets multiplied to your variable. So on the other side, it's 0x, a 0 slope. On the nx, it's a 2 slope. That's greater. So n has a greater slope. We picked our answers. We're done with that question. All right, let's go here. Now this one's a big one here because usually when we see a percent, we think exponential, right? So that's completely different than what we're actually going to do in this question. Exponential is y equals a times b to the x power. Your x is an exponent. We are not using this on this question because of one thing that we can read here. It's only calculated on the original amount. If they're only calculating the interest on the original amount, it's not exponential anymore. It's linear, which in class we learned as P plus PRT, right? More importantly, right, you don't have to remember P plus PRT for this one question, right? You get a question like this, you want the way out, it's simple. Multiply 11,000 times your 3 years times your percent as a decimal. If that number is lower than 1,500, then you check the box. But if it's higher, you do not check the box because he does not want to pay more than that. And you do that to all these numbers really quickly, and you see when you have to stop checking boxes. Alright? Keep it moving. Now here, this is pretty simple. Right? 36 gallons on the first container, 30 minutes, and it's empty. So because it's empty, we can just divide 36 by 30 minutes, right? Which gives us our rate of drain, right? 1.2-ish. And now we know that there are 36 gallons in that spot, in that container. Now we go to container B here. Let's change the color so you don't get confused. Container B is 60 gallons, right? But in 30 minutes, it still has 15 gallons in there. So we have to subtract the 15 gallons that are still in there. Then we can divide it by our time, and it will give us the actual value. In this case, it's 45 divided by 30, which is about 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, I forgot. But it's bigger than 1.2. And there are 60 gallons in there. Now, we can answer this question because they're just telling you container C has the most water, which means your answer has to be greater than 60. So you would choose the number 70 if you get three choices like this. And then over here, same concept. It says it drains the water slowest, so we need a number smaller than 1.2. It's one of those hard questions that when you look at it, it's hard, but when you solve it, it's easy. Alright, here's just another couple literal solve. One second. Little equation to solve here. So let me just remind you, if you're trying to get a letter by itself, more letters means less work. Don't think this is more difficult. If you want the G to get by itself, you need to add H to both sides to eliminate it from the left side. So So we can start clearing up the side where your variable is. And now TG are touching. That means you divide by what you want out of there. So you're dividing by T. And your answer is W plus H divided by T over T. Here's the same process, but you're only doing the last step. Divide by T, and you're done. So even if this is a long word problem, if they give you an equation like this, and they ask you to solve it in terms of G or anything like that, you can just solve for the letter algebraically and answer it. Same thing here, right? You can cross multiply, or you can just think the opposite of division is multiplication. So either way you get the same answer. I like to cross multiply and then just divide. So if we want F by itself, we divide by W, and our answer is TZ over W. Now here we don't have to solve the whole thing, but I just want to make sure you understand what they're asking for here. On these boxes, these are the missing equations that come out after doing your step. So here you would distribute first. Here, so on the box, you put your result from distributing, one step at a time, and whatever you did is what you write on this side. What do you do after you distribute always? You look for like terms. So this is going to be collect like terms. Make sure when you collect like terms, you put the result of it in the box. Does that make sense? Now we can start getting the variables to the same side. Keep going. I'm not going to finish the equation. That's not what this video is for. Alright, this is just an expression to simplify. Alright, make sure you remember if this was a minus, it'd be a negative times a negative 4x, which is plus positive 12x squared. So no matter what signs they give you, it belongs to the number that's directly to the right of that sign. So in this case, we get positive 15x minus 12x to the second power, because when you multiply anything with the same base, you have to add the exponents. Bring down your 10x squared, and of course look for like terms before you put this whole thing in there. You have like terms. Bring down your positive 15x. Your answer has to stay as two terms because these are not like terms, they can't be put together. Now same concept, right? If this was a minus, but if it was a minus, look how your answer would have changed. Your answer would have been, or your results would have been 10x squared minus 15x plus 12x squared. And that changes the entire answer to a much bigger value in the front. So just make sure you pay attention to the signs, because look how different your answer can come out just with missing a minus. Alright, here, plug in your 6 for x and just solve what's in front of you. Simplify what's in front of you. So just make sure you follow order of operations. So inside of your parentheses, you multiply, then you subtract your 26. So 24 minus 26 will give you negative 2. And now raise your negative 2 to the second power, which equals 4. Same thing down here, but it's a 3 exponent. So for example, let's say I plug in this 8 here. That'll give me 48 minus 50, which is negative 2. Negative 2 to the third power equals negative 8. So make sure you use the sign in the calculator, or remember your sign rules. Alright, last page here. It's the same concept, right? Plug into both spots the 13. This does not mean plug in the 13 on one x, 15 on the other. F of 13 means you plug in 13 to the x in the equation. If there's more than one x, you plug into both. And then what you get from it is what you put as a result of f of 13. So remember, you multiply here and get negative 39 first. Now you can subtract and then multiply by 13. Whatever value it gives you, you write it right here. I'm not going to solve it for you. Let's just randomize this number, 432. And then the 15, you're going to plug into those same two spots and get a value for the 15. Now whatever you get for the 15, right, you subtract at the end and you put your answer in here. So make sure you don't plug into each x and do it one time. You're going to have to solve this twice and then add or subtract depending on what's between these values. And over here, just make sure you multiply your negative 3 over 4 times the number first before bringing in the 15, because if it's a negative times a negative, then it would be 15 plus whatever number you get over there. But if it's not a negative, it's going to be 15 minus. So just pay attention to your signs. Alright, hopefully this helps.